All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Sapling edition of Evergreen Perspective. We're continuing our series on the charter review candidates. Right now, we got with us Morgan Holmgren, who's District 4, Position 3. Welcome to the show. Let's just dive right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of a little bit about your background, and then how long have you been here in Clark County?
Sure, yeah. So thanks, Ben, for having me. So again, I'm Morgan Holmgren. I guess I'll start with your last question. I've lived in Clark County for about 8 years now. My wife was born and raised here, but we met in college and ended up moving back a few years ago because we wanted to start a family near her family. So that's why we're here. Background on me. So I've grew up in Nevada. I went to college at Western Washington University. That's where I met my wife. I got a master's degree in political science at the University of Colorado Boulder. And from there, I started working in social science, statistics, community engagement in the kind of the education sphere. So right now, I'm working for a nonprofit in Portland, doing that kind of work, and a big part of that is collecting community engagement and community feedback. And the reason I chose to run was I was on the redistricting committee for Clark County in 2021, and I made some really interesting connections with people there. And we ran into some problems with the charter itself and the language in the charter, and it motivated me to want to help clarify that and kind of take that perspective and that learning forward.
That's very nice. I think that sounds like some pretty legit experience to bring to the charter. Um, you know, what inspired you to want to be involved in public service to begin with?
I since I was a kid, I've been really involved in politics. I think, the thing that I think of as being like the item that got me interested in politics as a kid was actually like Mad Magazine. Um, I don't know. I think it was in the late '90s. I started getting that, and I started following the 2000 presidential election, and they had like really good, funny coverage of the 2000 primary for Democrats, where they like did a bunch. Actually, I guess all the candidates, where they did these like silly little poems and stuff about the candidates. And then I got more involved in like actual activism with the passage of the Patriot Act. And I, had some issues with like the connection to our constitutional system, and from there I just kind of like got more and more interested in politics broadly. Um, that got me into becoming a political scientist in college and getting a master's degree in political science, which I ended up really focusing on things like constitutional design, electoral systems, um, state and local politics, especially an interest in ballot initiatives and referenda and alternative methods of getting people to make decisions. And so it's just kind of been there from that. In terms of public service, both my parents were public servants. My dad was an engineer, but he worked for the state government in Nevada. My mom worked for the Bureau of Land Management. I think they're both people who are really dedicated to the idea that we have public goods and public resources, and that some of the best things that we can do as a society is give back. And so it's just something I've always wanted to do, is be someone who's thinking about, I guess, the broad public rather than just necessarily our private interests.
We definitely need that in the world, right? We need folks like you to step up and be involved. So I guess with that in mind, kind of in your own words, what is the Charter Review Commission? What does it actually do for the citizens of Clark County?
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, the Charter Review Commission is kind of building on the idea that, no government is like finished, right? Like we're never done thinking about what the structure is. And the charter is, setting the baseline, the foundations for how we think the government should be structured and should function. And so, every so often we're supposed to get together with a group of citizens and review that structure and make sure it really reflects our values. I think the other thing to keep in mind is like, we don't want to do too much in the charter either. It's a limited document. I think, we know that constitutions or that are overly complex, have too much information in them, have too many restrictions. It sounds good to put, to at least to people who really don't want to have higher taxes, for example, sounds good to put a limitation on tax increases. But often it doesn't mean that your local community has lower taxes. It just means that the tax increases happen in different ways or in different places. And so I think of like being really interested in creating a system of government that represents the people, represents our values, but at the same time allows for our elected representatives who can be reelected and therefore are more accountable to the people. They're not in a one-time off position, giving them the flexibility to really appropriately govern our county. And so those are kind of like, I think those are like the trade-offs that we have to consider. It's like, how involved do we want to be as a commission to change the way the charter is structured versus like really showing restraint in the fact that it's like the people who are elected to these positions, they're really there to, again, set that like the baseline, the foundation for the county government, not to be the county government itself.
Right. And so why do you think all that should matter? Why should that matter to everyday Clark County residents? How's it going to affect me as a Clark County resident?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one, there's a chance that the Charter Review Commission goes through the charter and says like, let's keep things mostly the same. I think there's a number of candidates who are advocating for that, and it wouldn't be the worst outcome in the world. And I think the reason for that is like it does structure how the county council, the sheriff, the county manager, the other executive elected office positions like the clerk and the auditor, how they're selected, how they're elected. One of the issues that's come up in this campaign is, the ballot initiative and referenda process here in Clark County. Should the number of signatures be lowered so that we have more things on the ballot? So if you're a citizen of Clark County, that's one of the things you might want to consider. Like, do you want to see more local ballot initiatives every 1 or 2 years? Like, some of the candidates are advocating for that. Some of the candidates aren't. That might be a real tangible difference. I think, the last Charter Review Commission switched from having 4 districts to 5 districts. I think it's been a success. I think that was a good reform. I'm glad that the voters approved it. I wouldn't want to go back to having a single at-large county position on the council. But I think at the same time, like that did make a difference for the people of Clark County, because it meant that you had more geographic representation on the council. So like if you are someone who lives in Battleground and Ridgefield, like there's a seat that's specifically serving Battleground and Ridgefield that isn't also tied to Camas and Washougal, which is probably what it would have been had we kept the 4-district system. So those are kind of the different ways that I think an average person might see is like, oh, like someone who lives in my community is more likely to be on the council rather than someone who lives in a different town that feels far away potentially. And I also think like you might see more things on the ballot, or you might see less things on the ballot, depending on how the Charter Review Commission goes ahead with things.
Right. So how do you ensure, if you're elected to the Charter Commission, how do you ensure that you're getting good community input and involvement to inform your role on the council?
Yeah, I mean, so I think one thing that's really important to remind everybody is like nothing the commission does is just approved, right? Like everything that they go through is going to have to go to the voters before it gets on into the charter. So there is a check on the authority and power there. I think the other thing that is really important is to get that community feedback. And, to me, as someone who collects community feedback professionally, it's really important to get an accurate sample of the population and to get the kind of diversity that this county really has. This is a county that's got a very urban center in downtown Vancouver. I mean, I guess downtown Vancouver is not a sleepy suburb of Portland anymore. But it also has some pretty significant rural areas too. And so you need to be thinking about hosting events, hosting feedback sessions in all over the place. And part of that is building connections with organizations that have legit membership, have people who will show up. I've done a number of community engagement sessions, both as a volunteer and as professionally, where we try really hard to get people to show up for things, and there's like 3 people who come. And those are the people who often have a lot to say. They have really strong opinions, but you have no idea if that's what their neighbors really think, that the other people around them. And so I think, as a Charter Review Commission, one of the things I'm really interested in is how can we be a little more creative in the way we do that? One is to prioritize like geographic diversity. I think it is also to prioritize utilizing the existing relationships that organizations throughout the county already have. Again, we just can't do it all on our own. We can't build it from nothing. And I think another thing is to think about other ways of collecting feedback. Is that doing it asynchronously and getting people to leave, voicemails or videos, or, doing commissioning surveys, reaching out to specific organizations, nonprofits that serve communities that are underrepresented. I think all of these are, thinking about how you solicit feedback. Those are all things that we as a commission will need to have serious conversations about right away. So if we get elected, the first thing we really should be talking about is what is our public engagement strategy? Are we gonna sit down and come up with a list of 10 proposals and bring those to the public? Or are we gonna do public engagement right away and then come up with our list of proposals? And then once we have the idea of where we're gonna do that public engagement, how are we going to organize those events? How are we going to organize getting that feedback and do it in a way that isn't just the same old, which I think often is we hold an event and whoever shows up and we count that as good enough.
I think you bring up some very valid points there. I think as we kind of wrap this session up, what is the one thing you want voters to remember from this podcast?
Well, hopefully they don't remember that I'm just a windbag and I talk too much. But I hope that they recognize that it's I'm going to take this seriously. I'm someone who, that if they do elect me, that I'm going to try to bring professionalism. I'm going to try to represent the people both who agree and disagree with me, because I think we should be representing the whole population, and that this is something where we're going to be having to do this as a community. And so I hope that they can trust that I'm someone who will, take it seriously as a task.
Right. And so where can people learn more about you and your campaign?
Sure. So my main thing is I've got a website. It's holmgren-clarkcharter.com. Take a look there. I am trying to post on it regularly. You can also just reach out to me if you want. I have an email address. It's morgan.holmgren@outlook.com. I'm checking it every day. People can reach out to me, provide some feedback. But yeah, those are the main ways to reach out.
Awesome. I really appreciate you coming on the show today, and good luck on the campaign trail, and I'll see you out there.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben.
All right.
It's a fun opportunity. Bye.